Hello. Tonight, I'd like to do a reading from this book, I Am Love. Yoga, Ayahuasca, A Course in Miracles, and the Journey Back to the Place We Never Left. This is a book that was just released this past year. And what the book does is it gives a little introduction to A Course in Miracles. Then it goes into what is ayahuasca and how can the ayahuasca experience somehow relate to A Course in Miracles. For people that have done both, there is a connection. The book goes into it more. And the third section is what is non-dualism? And some people believe that A Course in Miracles is a pure non-dualistic teaching. That's what Ken Wapnick said, maintained, and people that follow his school of thought go by that. Other people beg to differ, and that's everyone's prerogative. That is my viewpoint, and I feel that the closest tradition we have to what the Course is saying is Advaita Vedanta, from, let's say, the Hindu tradition. Advaita Vedanta is the teaching of non-dualism. So, and it goes back to the Upanishads. But this little video here tonight is going to be, why is A Course in Miracles so difficult for people to understand, and how can it be understood more clearly for those who really want to? And this is probably more for people that are new to the Course. For those who have been going through it for a while, maybe this is not so helpful, but it could be helpful even for seasoned Course students. So I'm going to read a little bit. I'm also going to talk a little bit. So some of the reasons, I wrote 10 reasons. 10 reasons why it's challenging to understand A Course in Miracles and how to understand it better. It's challenging to understand A Course in Miracles because text and context. First of all, Course in Miracles is meant to be read and studied and practiced. All three of those. Meaning, you start at the beginning and then you go to the end. And that's just like we read any book. We start at the beginning and we read to the end. And no different with A Course in Miracles, but it might be helpful for some people to skip around, to start and take a certain lesson and work with that. Maybe you hear a quote from the Course and that's meaningful to you. Like my dad, who wasn't into any of this, he used to say a lot, would you rather be right or happy? And that's from A Course in Miracles, but he didn't know it was from A Course in Miracles. So of course you can take things from the Course and work with them. But if you really want to understand it, it's really best to start from the beginning. Okay? It's also important to know, number 2, that Jesus is the narrator of it. He gave this message to Helen Schuckman, and she understood that he was the one that was giving it to her, and he speaks throughout the Course, and he sometimes talks about himself in the text. Okay? Symbol and metaphor. It's important to start to view A Course in Miracles as more of a poetic, metaphorical, symbolic document than it is a literal, that you take every word literally. Okay, we'll just leave it at that the Course is best understood as great poetry, and poetry lends itself to multiple levels of meaning. So if you could do that, then you'll be probably better off than if you say, well, this doesn't make sense, this contradicts that, and you're gonna be tearing your hair out. Okay, the next one is number 4, thought reversal. Essentially, A Course in Miracles uses a lot of terms from the biblical traditions, especially Christianity, but it uses them in very different ways, such as the word atonement. I'm not going to go into what the meanings of these words are. Atonement, sacrifice, forgiveness, even God, even what God means, even what Jesus means. It's different, and some people say it's even completely opposite. And Jesus says at one point later that this is a complete thought reversal. It's a complete reversal of what we've been conditioned to think and to believe. Okay, so that's another important one, is that don't try to fit what you've brought from other places to fit the Course. It doesn't really work that way. Number 5 is you have to read the text and do the workbook, not just do the workbook. The text is the metaphysics, it's the theory. And if you don't do the metaphysics, if you don't understand what's behind what the workbook is saying, you'll probably not get too far with it. And I think I've met people, and there are a lot of people who study the Course for years, but they don't get it because they don't really give their full attention to all of it and really want to understand it. But they read it selectively, they take things out of context, etc., and they end up, some people even end up burning it or throwing it away and saying it's trash, it's from the devil, it's whatever. But the truth is that they just don't understand it, and they didn't give it enough time and their attention. Okay, number 6, and that brings us to the next one, which is that Course in Miracles is very threatening to the ego, and so we will tend to read it, we'll tend to bring it down to where we are as opposed to coming up to where it is, and that is because we feel threatened, and we misread it, we don't fully understand it, but we think we do. And that's part of the problem. You think you understand it, but you really don't fully understand it. I'm including myself in this too. That, I'm not saying I fully understand it, but I'm talking about some of the issues that we may face. And these are not just reading A Course in Miracles issues. These are life issues. Everything we're saying here is that we make all these mistakes in the rest of our life as well. The next stumbling block with the Course in Miracles is the language barrier. It's written in such a way that people scratch their heads when they start reading it. It's written in biblical, patriarchal, Christian language that for many people is very off-putting. And the truth is, though, is that the Course is all about going beyond the form to understand the content, which means that you learn, when you are reading the Course, you're learning to put aside the packaging and go for the juice that's there, the inside, the content. That's really, and that is true for everything, is that we start to see people not as we generally see them, as bodies on the surface, but we see the spirit in everyone. And that's really what this is all getting at. It's more holographic than linear. It's not a linear presentation. It's more of, it's been likened to a symphony, brings in a theme, and then it goes to another theme, another theme, another theme, and then it goes back to some of the earlier themes, and it expands and expounds on those themes, if you just took one page of A Course in Miracles, 1,200-page book, and you just read that one page and you really understood that one page, even if you just understood the introduction to A Course in Miracles, that's the whole thing right there. But because we don't understand that, just the introduction, we generally need the whole thing to really get it. And then after you've been reading and practicing for a while, then you start to see that it's saying the same thing over and over and over again. And at that point, you're really getting it. I think you're really starting to get it. Okay, intellect and heart. It's written on an intellectual level. it's written maybe more for intellectual people, people that think and use words and like to read, but really there is a deeper heart. In yoga we say bhakti. There is it's coming from a deep heart space, and you can really feel that when you really get into it, and there's some very beautiful passages in the course. Okay, maybe I'll read. Yeah, let me just read this real quick. This one passage that all of a sudden it just kicks into this beautiful poetry. All your past, except your beauty, is gone. This is what I'm titling it. How can you who are so holy suffer? All your past, except its beauty, is gone, and nothing is left but a blessing. I have saved all your kindnesses in every loving thought you ever had. I have purified them of the errors that hid their light, and kept them for you in their own perfect radiance. They are beyond destruction and beyond guilt. They came from the Holy Spirit within you, and we know what God creates is eternal. It's a beautiful poetic passage. It actually goes on from there, but finally, the last point, number 10, and I'll let you go. I know this has been a long video here, but it's helpful, I think, to have someone who you trust to help you to understand A Course in Miracles. I go to Ken Wapnick. I believe he really understood it. Maybe he was still learning, and there were things that he was still getting. Maybe. But I think if you really listen to his videos, read his books, etc., his articles, essays, you will see that he really had a profound understanding, and he was able to really communicate it to people in a loving, kind way, and funny way, I should say. So I think it's really helpful to have an interpreter of A Course in Miracles. I go by Ken. Whoever you follow, though, keep in mind that whatever teacher you follow, just keep in mind that they may be, bringing in their own things. Sometimes that's good, because it is good to have people's own experience and other things. But I would say, for me personally, I appreciate Ken the most. I'm still going through all of his videos and his talks and his books, and finding them helpful all the time. He also was saying, much the same thing over and over again, and he harped upon the same things over and over again. But I think that they're worth hearing again and again, because we can get off track. So thank you so much for listening, or get off course, I should say. Thanks for listening. Hopefully this was helpful for you. And the book, this book is available on Amazon. I really am proud of this book. It's not perfect, but what is? And I think for those who are really going through maybe on a spiritual quest, or going through a deep spiritual process, this might be helpful. Thank you.